You know, there's a thought out there, Minister, that when we see the billions that are being spent battling a COVID pandemic and something like that being treated rightly as an emergency, this is an emergency. Where's the funding for this? Why isn't the issue of gender-based violence being treated as an emergency in this country?
Well, to be fair to Minister Roderick O'Gorman, he secured an additional 21 million this year to support domestic, sexual and gender-based violence, OK? And it's cross-departmental, and we always talk about departments working on their own, so Department of Justice, the Department of Children and TUSLA are the regulatory on it. But you asked a very important question there, if I could just come in on it, Claire, for 1 second. You said, when will it change? See, Aisling did everything right from a woman's point of view. She went for a run in daylight and she didn't know the person. So for me or for any other woman that wants to know what's the right way to do it, she went in the middle of the day, she wasn't in the dark. And that to me is the trigger. That's why society today, that's why we're all stunned. Because
but to that question,
yes.
OK, so what needs to change? Because this case and this awful death today isn't it's the first in a long line.
There's two things.
And yet we're still seeing this fear. We're talking about the everyday occurrences and that fear that this can actually happen. And there is a sense that it's not being acted upon. I mean, we could talk in a very practical measure, like tougher sentences. Isn't the justice system failing women? And what's being done about that?
Absolutely. There's two ways to look at the justice system. And if we're to look at any case, first and foremost, how do you prevent it? Is it about the education? Is it about the awareness? What are the red flags in advance? A, to protect the person themselves that perpetrates the crime. But then we have to look at the revolving door, which is going through the court system all of the time, the free legal aid. And also, do we need a circuit breaker within all of that to actually look at it once and for all?
And do we? And
we
why
certainly
aren't we?
do. We certainly
Why haven't we? I mean, successive governments have refused to legislate for stiffer sentences.
It's not just stiffer sentences that we need. We also need to ensure that when a person is at risk to the general public, that they shouldn't be released on bail. That is one of the basic fundamentals that needs to start there. Stiffer sentences, yes, but we need to start with the basic, is not to have people going back out into the community where they can commit the crime again.
Okay, Sarah, to that courts issue and to where we go now and what we do if we are to take proper action on this. Is it around educating men, you know, having that conversation, normalising it right around the country in every household, that this is how you do the right thing?
Sure.
Not telling women to get a special app or have an alarm or have a spray in your bag or whatever, but that conversation to be for men? Or is it also looking at the penal framework and what's in place and how that isn't serving anyone?
Right, well, succinctly, I hope. Firstly, it is a complete red herring to ever focus on the behaviour of a victim, and equally a red herring to look at even the environment in which an attack takes place. It is an environment. You know, a darkened street doesn't somehow magically incite an otherwise mild-mannered individual to suddenly attack. The focus has to be on the perpetrator. First and foremost, the cause and the consequence rests with the perpetrator, who makes a choice to behave in a certain way. There is very little anyone can do who is going to be targeted for violence to mitigate or prevent it. They can only try and protect themselves, but they are not the causal factor. So I think it's really important that at the same time, the reality is that women will continue to try and manage their safety because they simply don't feel safe. So what we need to do is something that is effectively cradle to grave. We are about to have the new National Domestic Sexual and Gender-Based Violence Strategy published. The first iteration is due out in February. We welcome it. We and our colleagues and many different stakeholders have fed into it. But it has to be a tripartite approach. So it's like a three-legged stool. We have to have prevention, which starts at the very earliest education. It's about equality. You know, educating our boys and our girls about respect, mutuality, parity of esteem, even while we're different. So totally tackling all these negative, unhelpful gender stereotypes that are not good for boys and not good for girls. We also then have to have protection, because unfortunately, even with the best will in the world, these things are continuing. We have to have specialist support and resourcing for that. And then we do have to have punishment and a justice system that works as an active deterrent. So it isn't any one of those things. It has to be all of them. It has to be cross-government. It has to be resourced, and it has to be actively implemented and reviewed on an ongoing basis. That is what we need to do. It's simple in some respects, but it's a challenge. And we're optimistic now. I think the conversation has started with COVID. It's continuing, but it needs not to continue on the back of these appalling incidents. It needs to change really, really fast. But we're hopeful, and we'll be doing our part to try and encourage the government to do that.